The young woman arrived at the mansion early in the morning. She had traveled a long distance from her small town, carrying little more than a suitcase and a heart full of hope. She had always wanted to help people, to make a difference in someone's life. And when she saw the advertisement for a caregiver, she knew this was her chance. She had read about the billionaire she would work for, a man who had suffered a life-changing accident and now spent his days confined to a wheelchair. People said he was strict and difficult, that he trusted no one, but she didn't feel afraid. She felt that maybe, just maybe, she could reach him. The mansion itself was intimidating. Tall iron gates, manicured gardens, and walls so high that they seemed to cut the sky in half. She had never seen anything like it in her life. The front door was massive, carved with intricate patterns and shining brass handles that glimmered in the morning sun. As she stepped closer, a sense of nervous excitement filled her. This was a world she had never known, but she was determined to do her best. A tall man in a uniform opened the door. He looked her over quickly and said, "You must be the new caregiver. Follow me." His tone was firm, but not unkind. She nodded, trying to hide her nervousness, and followed him through the house. The interior was just as grand as the outside. Its marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and paintings that seemed to watch her with every step. She tried not to be overwhelmed, reminding herself that she was here to work, not to admire the wealth around her. Finally, they reached a room at the end of a long corridor. The man opened the door and gestured for her to enter. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. There, sitting in a sleek, modern wheelchair, was the billionaire. He was taller than she expected, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to see everything. He was dressed in simple clothes, a dark shirt and trousers, but the way he held himself spoke of authority and control. He looked at her for a long moment before speaking. "I assume you know what this job entails?" His voice was calm, but carried an edge of challenge. She nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. I understand, and I am ready to do whatever is needed." Studied her for a few more seconds, then waved a hand toward a chair. "Sit. We'll see how well you handle things." As she sat, she tried to stay composed, but her heart was racing. She knew this was the first test, the moment that would decide whether she could earn his trust. She listened carefully as he began to outline the daily routine, the tasks that would fall to her, and the strict expectations he had. Everything was detailed and precise, from meal preparation to medication schedules. It was more responsibility than she had ever faced, but she felt ready. Over the next few hours, she began her duties. She helped him with breakfast, arranging everything just as he liked it. She learned how to adjust his wheelchair and position him comfortably. She cleaned and organized the space around him, always careful to anticipate his needs before he asked. He watched her silently at first, occasionally making small comments or corrections. At times, he would sigh, a sound that seemed to carry frustration from years of confinement. She didn't take it personally. Instead, she focused on doing her work well, hoping her effort would be noticed. It wasn't easy. He had moments of impatience, snapping at her for small mistakes or for moving too slowly. But she remained calm, speaking politely and gently correcting any errors she made. She found herself learning quickly, adapting to his preferences and routines. Despite his stern demeanor, she began to notice little things how he preferred. The sunlight on his left side during breakfast, the way he tapped his fingers when he was thinking, or the subtle way his eyes softened when he listened to music. These small details felt like clues, like glimpses into the man behind the walls he had built around himself. By afternoon, she was exhausted but determined. She had spent hours assisting him, learning the complex routines of his life, and trying to understand his moods. She found moments to smile, even when he was stern, and noticed small reactions from him, an approving nod, a relaxed posture, a quiet acknowledgement. These tiny signs encouraged her, made her feel that she was making a difference as the day went on. She began to speak more, not just about tasks, but about simple things, stories from her town, little jokes, observations about the weather outside. At first, he didn't respond much, but slowly he began to engage. A small comment here, a short laugh there. She realized that her innocence, her straightforward kindness, was something he hadn't seen in a long time. It was unfamiliar to him, and yet it seemed to disarm him. During the evening, she helped him settle for the night. She made sure he was comfortable, adjusted his blankets, and arranged his pillows. She noticed the way he watched her, silently, almost as if he was trying to understand her. There was a weight in his eyes, a mixture of curiosity and something softer, something he had hidden from everyone for years. She didn't know it yet, but he was beginning to let her in, even in a small way. Before leaving the room, she spoke softly. "I hope I can make your days a little easier, sir." He looked at her, his expression unreadable, then nodded. "We'll see." As she walked out of the room, she felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. The day had been long and challenging, but she felt a spark of connection. She knew this was just the beginning, that earning his trust would take time, patience, and genuine care. Yet, she felt ready. There was something about him, beneath the walls and the stern exterior, that she wanted to understand, to reach. That night, as she lay in her small room in the mansion, she thought about the day. The billionaire was a puzzle. Complicated and guarded, but she didn't feel fear only, a quiet determination. She reminded herself why she had come, why she wanted this job, and why she believed that even the hardest hearts could be touched by kindness. The next morning brought another chance, another day to prove herself. She dressed carefully, feeling a little more confident now, knowing a little more about the man she was going to care for. She carried her meals and supplies with steady hands, ready to meet him again, ready to face the challenges, and ready to learn more about the man whose life she had entered. As she approached his room, she could hear the faint hum of machinery and the rustle of sheets. He was awake, sitting in his wheelchair as usual, but this time he looked at her and smiled ever so slightly. It was a small smile, almost imperceptible, but it held a world of meaning. She returned the smile gently, feeling warmth spread through her chest. From that moment she knew that this would not just be a job, it would be a journey, a test of patience, compassion, and understanding. And though she did not yet know the depth of the challenges ahead, she felt ready to face them, to learn, and to see if her presence could truly change the life of a man who had built walls around his heart. The mansion was still grand and intimidating, but to her it felt a little less lonely. She had begun to see beyond the walls, beyond the wealth and power, and into the heart of a man who had forgotten what it meant to trust. And somewhere deep down, she hoped that her innocence, her care, and her genuine kindness could be the key to melting those walls, one small moment at a time. The second day began quietly. The young woman woke before sunrise, the soft light filtering through the large curtains of her small room in the mansion. She dressed carefully, choosing comfortable clothes that would allow her to move freely. She knew that today would be just as demanding as yesterday, perhaps even more so. She took a deep breath and reminded herself of her purpose, to make his life easier and to bring some warmth. The lonely days of the man she cared for. When she entered his room, he was already awake, sitting silently in his wheelchair by the window. The morning light fell across his face, highlighting the sharp lines and the fatigue that shadowed his eyes. He looked at her briefly and gave a small nod, acknowledging her presence. She smiled softly, carrying a tray of breakfast she had prepared, making sure everything was arranged just as he liked it. He took the tray without a word, his movements slow and precise. As she adjusted his pillows and helped him sit comfortably, she noticed the tension in his shoulders. He had spent many years carrying the weight of his own expectations and the disappointment of life, and it showed. She spoke gently, telling him about the morning outside, the birds singing, and the sunlight that made the garden glow. At first, he didn't respond much, but slowly, she saw a flicker of interest in his eyes, a sign that he was listening. Throughout the morning, she assisted him with his exercises, carefully following the instructions she had been given.
Ow.
The movements were slow and deliberate, designed to keep his body strong despite his paralysis. She encouraged him softly, praising small victories, celebrating even minor progress. At times, he would grow frustrated, letting out a sharp sigh or muttering under his breath. She never took it personally. She understood that frustration was part of his world now, and she remained patient, guiding him through each exercise with care. As the day progressed, she began to notice more about him. The way his eyes lingered on certain objects in the room, the subtle gestures of his hands, and the way he responded to music that played softly in the background. She discovered that he had a taste for classical pieces and would quietly hum along when a favorite melody came on. She smiled to herself, thinking that even in a life filled with control and isolation, there were still small joys to be found. At lunchtime, she prepared a simple meal, making sure each bite was presented in a way that would be easy for him to handle. He watched her work, observing every movement. She was careful not to rush, speaking softly and explaining each step. He made a small comment about the seasoning, and she nodded, adjusting the flavors according to his taste. It was a minor exchange, but it felt significant. He had rarely spoken with someone who cared enough to listen and respond. The afternoon brought more challenges. She had to manage medications, adjust his wheelchair for comfort, and ensure the room was kept clean and orderly. Each task required attention to detail and a gentle touch. She learned quickly, paying close attention to his reactions and preferences. Sometimes she would catch him watching her with a look that was hard to read. There was no warmth there yet, only curiosity, but it was a start. Slowly, she felt that her presence was becoming a small part of his routine, something he could rely on. There were moments of tension, too. He had a sharp tongue at times, making critical remarks or expressing frustration over his limitations. She did not respond with anger or defensiveness. Instead, she listened, acknowledging his feelings without judgment. She discovered that her calm and understanding presence was beginning to affect him in subtle ways. He no longer snapped at her as frequently, and when he did, it was often followed by a pause, as if he were reflecting on his own words. In the evening, she suggested a small change. She noticed that he had not looked outside for most of the day. Gently, she wheeled him to the window, arranging the chair so he could see the garden. The flowers were in bloom, and the sunlight cast a warm glow across the courtyard. He stayed there quietly, observing the scene, and for the first time, she heard him speak about something other than his routine or his pain. "It is peaceful," he said softly, almost to himself. She smiled, feeling a small triumph. She had given him a moment of calm, a reminder that life still had beauty, despite the challenges he faced. He looked at her briefly and nodded, a gesture that carried more meaning than words could express. During dinner, she tried to bring a little lightness to the evening. She spoke of her childhood memories, the simple joys she had known, and shared small stories that made her laugh. At first he listened silently, but slowly she saw a change. A faint smile appeared on his face, almost imperceptible, but genuine. It was a tiny crack in the wall he had built around himself, a momentary glimpse of the man he had been before the accident. Before the isolation and bitterness took hold, later, she helped him get ready for bed, adjusting his position carefully and making sure he was comfortable. She noticed the way he relaxed slightly in her presence, the tension in his muscles easing as he settled under the blankets. He didn't speak much, but the silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was filled with a quiet understanding, an unspoken acknowledgement that her care mattered, that her presence had meaning. Before leaving the room, she spoke softly. "I hope tomorrow will be another good day, sir." He looked at her, and for a brief moment, there was a softness in his gaze. He nodded, a simple gesture, yet it felt like progress. She smiled and quietly closed the door, leaving him to rest. That night, she sat in her room reflecting on the day. She had faced challenges, moments of frustration, and the weight of responsibility, yet she felt a growing connection. She realized that her kindness, her patience, and her sincerity were beginning to touch a part of him that had long been hidden. It was a slow process, and she knew it would take time. But she was encouraged by the small signs of change she had seen. She thought about the way he had looked at the garden, the faint smile during dinner, and the softness in his gaze before sleep. These moments were small, yet they were victories in themselves. She reminded herself that change came gradually, often unnoticed at first, but that each step mattered. Her goal was not to rush him, not to force him to feel something he was not ready to, but to provide care, comfort, and the reminder that he was not alone. As she drifted off to sleep, she felt a sense of purpose. The days ahead would be challenging, but she was ready. She would continue to be patient, to listen, to understand, and to care. She hoped that in time, her presence would bring more light into his life, that her innocence and kindness could gradually melt the walls he had built around himself. And somewhere deep down, she felt that the journey they were on together would change them both, in ways neither of them could yet imagine. The mansion, once cold and imposing, felt a little less so to her now. She had begun to see beyond the grandeur and the isolation, glimpsing the man behind the walls. And though the path ahead was uncertain, she felt ready to take each step, to learn, to care, and to witness the slow transformation of a man whose life had been shadowed by pain, but who might yet find warmth and hope again. The third day began with a gentle morning light spilling through the windows, filling the room with warmth. The young woman moved quietly, carrying her supplies and preparing to start the day. She had begun to understand the rhythm of the mansion, the subtle cues of the billionaire's moods, and the ways in which he responded to care. She felt more confident now, though she knew that earning his trust was still a delicate process. When she entered his room, he was awake, sitting by the window as usual. This time, he looked at her with a small, thoughtful expression, as if he had been considering her presence even before she arrived. He didn't speak immediately, letting her settle him and adjust his pillows. She moved with practiced care, attentive to every detail, knowing that comfort and small gestures mattered greatly. As she helped him with his morning routine, she decided to try something new. She brought a small notebook with sketches she had drawn over the past few days, simple things from her life and the world outside. She hesitated for a moment, unsure if he would be interested, but decided to show them anyway. Gently, she held the notebook in front of him. He glanced at the pages, his eyes narrowing as he examined the drawings. They were simple, innocent sketches of trees, flowers, and small animals, scenes from her town and her childhood memories. At first, he remained silent, and she wondered if she had made a mistake. But then, slowly, he reached out and touched the pages, his fingers tracing the lines with a careful, almost hesitant curiosity. "These are simple," he said softly, not unkindly. "But there is something honest about them." She smiled, feeling a small warmth in her chest. "They are just things I enjoy, sir. I thought you might like to see them." He studied the notebook a little longer, and she noticed the subtle softening of his expression. For a moment, he seemed not like a billionaire confined to a wheelchair, but like a man who could still appreciate beauty even in the smallest things. She realized that this was a step forward, a small opening into the walls he had built around himself. The morning passed with them, sharing quiet conversation. He began to talk, not about routines or instructions, but about memories from before his accident. He spoke of travels, books he had read, and moments from his youth that he had kept hidden from most people. She listened intently, asking gentle questions, never pushing him further than he was willing to go. The trust between them was growing, fragile, yet real. At lunchtime, she prepared his favorite meal. He watched her carefully, occasionally making small comments about the seasoning or arrangement. But now, there was less criticism and more engagement. He even asked her a few questions about her life, about the town she came from, and her family. She answered simply, sharing stories with a natural ease that seemed to surprise him. After lunch, she wheeled him to a small terrace that overlooked the gardens. The breeze was cool, carrying the scent of flowers and fresh grass. She arranged his chair comfortably and sat nearby, reading quietly while he watched the birds in the sunlight. He didn't speak much, but his eyes followed the movement of her hands and the pages of her book. There was a calm between them now, a shared silence that felt easy and natural. Later, she suggested a small game to engage his mind, a puzzle she had brought. At first, he was skeptical, frowning at the idea, but slowly he began to participate, moving pieces and offering suggestions. They laughed quietly at mistakes and celebrated small victories. It was a light moment, a brief departure from the strict routines and the heaviness of his daily life. She saw him smile more freely, a warmth that had been absent for many years. As the afternoon wore on, she helped him with his exercises, guiding him with patience and gentle encouragement. There were moments of frustration, of course, when his body resisted or he became tired. But she did not scold or rush him. She spoke softly, reminding him to breathe, to take his time, and to focus on the small progress he made. Gradually, she noticed his movements becoming smoother, his attitude calmer, and a sense of cooperation emerging where resistance had once been. During a quiet moment, he asked her about her dreams, something personal he had not done before. She shared her desire to help people, to make a difference, and to bring comfort to those who were lonely or in pain. He listened, nodding slowly, as if considering her words. It was a rare moment of vulnerability, and she felt honored that he had shared it with her in the evening. She prepared his room for the night, ensuring he was comfortable and settled. Before leaving, she asked if he wanted to listen to music. He agreed, and she played a soft melody, one that seemed to touch something deep within him. He sat quietly, eyes closed, letting the notes fill the room. She watched him, noticing the relaxation in his shoulders and the subtle expression of peace on his face. It was a small victory, a sign that her presence was beginning to bring comfort and calm into his life. Before leaving, she spoke gently. "I hope today was easier, sir." He looked at her and, for the first time, spoke with something like warmth in his voice. It was better. Her heart lifted at the simple words. It was progress, small but meaningful. She knew that trust and connection were not built in a day, but every small step mattered. She closed the door quietly, leaving him to rest, carrying a sense of satisfaction and hope with her. That night, she reflected on the day's events. She had seen glimpses of the man behind the walls, the one who had been hurt, isolated, and lonely. She understood that the journey ahead would be long and delicate, requiring patience, empathy, and a consistent presence. Yet, she felt encouraged. She had begun to touch something within him, a part that had been hidden and neglected for years. She thought about the small moments that had made a difference, the notebook and sketches, the laughter over the puzzle, the shared music, and the gentle conversations. These were the building blocks of trust, the seeds of connection. She understood that her role was not only to care for his body, but to nurture his spirit, to remind him of the simple joys and human warmth he had long forgotten as she drifted off to sleep. She felt a quiet determination. She would continue to be patient, to observe, to listen, and to respond with kindness. She knew that the billionaire was a man of complexity, shaped by years of power, isolation, and loss. But she also believed that her presence, her innocence, and her sincere care could help him reconnect with life. Even in small ways, the mansion, once imposing and lonely, now felt like a place where change was possible. She had begun to see the man beneath the walls, the human being who still had the capacity to feel, to trust, and perhaps to hope again. And though the path ahead was uncertain, she felt ready to continue to learn, and to witness the slow unfolding of trust, connection, and transformation between them. The fourth day began quietly. With the soft morning sun casting a warm glow through the windows, the young woman felt a sense of familiarity as she prepared for her duties. She had grown used to the routines of the mansion and had begun to understand the subtle ways the billionaire expressed his moods. Though he was still guarded, she noticed small changes in him: softened glances, moments of patience, and a growing willingness to engage with her beyond mere instructions. As she entered his room, she noticed him looking at the sketches from her notebook she had left out yesterday. His eyes lingered on the pages, and for a brief moment he seemed lost in thought. She approached quietly, setting down the tray of breakfast she had prepared. "You seem to like these," she said softly, smiling. He looked up, his expression unreadable for a moment, then nodded slowly. "There is a simplicity here," he said. "It is honest." She felt a small warmth in her chest. His words were few, but they carried meaning. She helped him with his morning routine, carefully adjusting his position in the wheelchair, attending to his exercises, and guiding him with gentle encouragement. Each movement was precise, yet she managed to infuse care and patience, something that had begun to make a difference in his mood. As the morning progressed, she suggested a walk around the terrace. At first, he was hesitant, worried about the effort it would require. but she spoke softly, explaining that the fresh air might help him feel more relaxed. Slowly, he agreed, and she wheeled him outside. The sunlight warmed his face, and he observed the gardens with a quiet curiosity. She talked about the different flowers, the birds, and the sounds of the morning, and he listened, occasionally asking a question or making a comment. They spent time quietly, enjoying the simple act of being outside. For the first time in many years, he allowed himself to relax without concern for control or power. The young woman noticed the subtle shifts in his posture, the ease in his movements, and the occasional faint smile that appeared when he observed something interesting. These small changes encouraged her, reinforcing the idea that her patience and care were making an impact. After returning inside, she helped him with lunch. She had prepared his favorite meal, arranging it carefully to make it easy for him to manage. He observed her, commenting occasionally on small details. Unlike the earlier days, there was less criticism and more engagement. He even asked her a few questions about her sketches, showing genuine curiosity about her world outside the mansion. She answered with natural ease, sharing stories and laughter, creating a moment of connection that had been missing before. The afternoon brought another activity. She had noticed that he seemed interested in puzzles and games that engaged the mind. She brought out a simple chess set and explained the basic rules. At first he was skeptical, stating that he had not played in years. But slowly he allowed himself to participate. They moved pieces across the board, occasionally laughing at mistakes, celebrating small victories, and sharing quiet moments of thought. The game became more than a pastime. It was a way for them to interact, to share mental space, and to begin building trust and companionship. During a pause in the game, he looked at her and asked about her life, showing a side of curiosity he had not displayed before. She spoke of her family, the town she grew up in, and her dreams of helping people. Her words were simple and honest, and he listened, nodding thoughtfully. He was beginning to see her as a person, not just a caregiver performing tasks. That recognition brought a quiet change in him. Later, she suggested music. She had learned that certain melodies seemed to calm him and evoke faint memories. She played a soft piece, watching as he closed his eyes and let the notes fill the room. For a long moment, there was silence, punctuated only by the gentle rhythm of the music. She noticed a small tear in the corner of his eye. She realized that the emotions he had suppressed for years were beginning to surface. She did not speak, simply offering her presence as a quiet support. In the evening, there was a moment of tension. A minor disagreement arose over the arrangement of his room. Normally, he would have been sharp and critical. But this time, she listened carefully, acknowledging his preferences without defensiveness. They found a compromise, adjusting the space together. The incident, while small, marked a turning point. He realized that she respected him and his wishes. And she realized that patience and understanding could diffuse moments of frustration. It was a shared lesson in cooperation and trust. Dinner was calm, filled with gentle conversation. She spoke about her favorite memories from childhood, small stories that made her laugh, and he listened, occasionally smiling or making a quiet comment. There was a growing comfort between them, an ease that had not existed before. She could sense that he was beginning to allow himself to feel emotions without the fear of being judged or hurt. After dinner, she helped him prepare for bed. She arranged his pillows, adjusted his blankets, and ensured he was comfortable. Before leaving, she spoke softly, "I hope today was better for you, sir." He looked at her, and for the first time his words carried a warmth that was unmistakable. "It was better because of you." Her heart lifted at the words. It was a simple acknowledgement, yet it carried profound meaning. He had recognized her presence, her care, and her impact on his life. She closed the door quietly, leaving him to rest, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. The small walls he had built around his heart were showing cracks, and she knew that the process of emotional transformation was underway. That night, she reflected on the day. She had witnessed moments of progress, his curiosity about her world, his willingness to engage in games and music, and his acknowledgement of her care. She understood that building trust and connection was a gradual process. But she also saw that her patience, kindness, and sincerity were beginning to make a real difference. She thought about the subtle signs of change, the faint smile, the softened gaze, the quiet moments of engagement. Each small step was significant, and she was encouraged to continue. Her role was no longer just about physical care. It was about nurturing his spirit, reminding him of the simple joys of life, and being a consistent presence that he could rely on. As she drifted off to sleep, she felt a quiet determination. The billionaire was a man shaped by years of power, isolation, and pain. Yet she believed that her presence, her innocence, and her genuine care could help him reconnect with life, even in small ways. She was ready to continue to learn, and to witness the slow unfolding of trust, connection, and emotional transformation between them. The mansion, once imposing and cold, now felt like a place of possibility. She had begun to see the man beneath the walls, a human being who still had the capacity to feel, to trust, and perhaps to hope again. And though the journey ahead was uncertain, she was ready to take each step, knowing that her presence could bring warmth and light into a life that had long been shadowed by isolation and pain. The fifth day began with a quiet anticipation. The young woman felt a sense of familiarity and comfort in the routines of the mansion. But she knew this day could hold something special. Over the past days, she had seen subtle changes in the billionaire, the small cracks in his walls, the moments of trust, the softening of his expressions. Today, she hoped to continue nurturing that growth, and perhaps witness a transformation that went deeper than she had imagined. When she entered his room, he was already awake, sitting by the window with a thoughtful expression. The morning sun illuminated the garden outside, casting warm light into the room. He looked at her and offered a small smile, the kind that carried more warmth than words could express. It was a sign of comfort, recognition of her presence and the care she had given him. She prepared breakfast with the same attention to detail she had every day, arranging everything to make it easy for him. As she assisted him, they began to talk about small, personal things, memories, hopes, and little observations about the world outside the mansion. He spoke more freely than he had before, sharing stories from his youth, moments of joy, and even regrets. She listened intently, responding with empathy and understanding. The room felt warmer, filled with a human connection that had been absent for years. After breakfast, she suggested they spend some time outside. At first, he hesitated, but then he agreed, allowing her to wheel him to the terrace. The garden was alive with color, the scent of flowers mingling with the fresh morning air. They moved slowly, but the act of being outside, of feeling the sun and the breeze, brought a sense of freedom and peace. He observed the scene, occasionally commenting on the beauty of the flowers or the flight of a bird. She smiled at his engagement, realizing that these small moments were signs of a deeper transformation. Later, she brought out a set of letters and photographs she had found in his room over the past few days. They were personal items he had never shared with anyone. She asked gently if he wanted to look through them together. At first he was reluctant, but then he agreed. They spent time going through the memories, talking quietly about the people and moments captured in the photographs. For the first time in years, he shared emotions openly, discussing feelings of loss, joy, and longing. She listened without judgment, offering her presence as a steady support. It was a breakthrough, a moment of true emotional connection. Lunch was simple, but shared with conversation and laughter. He asked about her family, her childhood, and her experiences, showing a genuine interest that had not been present before. She shared her stories with warmth and honesty, and he responded with curiosity and engagement. The atmosphere was light, filled with moments of joy that had been missing in the mansion for a long time. In the afternoon, she suggested a creative activity. She had brought paints and brushes and gently encouraged him to try painting something from his imagination. He hesitated at first, saying he had no skill, but she assured him it was just for fun. Slowly, he began to paint, expressing emotions and memories he had long kept inside. She watched with quiet admiration, seeing the walls he had built around his heart continue to crumble, revealing a man capable of feeling and expressing again as the day wore on. She helped him with exercises and routines, guiding him patiently and encouraging progress. There were moments of fatigue and frustration, but she remained calm and supportive, helping him focus on small victories rather than setbacks. He responded with a willingness to participate, trust in her guidance that had grown steadily over the past days. In the evening, she suggested music once again. She played a soft, melodic piece that had become a favorite of his. He closed his eyes, letting the notes wash over him, and she noticed a peaceful expression on his face. For a long moment, there was silence, filled only with the beauty of the music. She realized that these small moments, the shared stories, the creative activities, the music, and laughter were building a foundation of emotional healing and connection. Dinner was filled with gentle conversation, shared smiles, and a sense of ease. He spoke freely about his feelings, his hopes, and even his fears. She listened with empathy and understanding, offering comfort through her presence and her words. The room was filled with warmth, a stark contrast to the cold, distant atmosphere of the first days. She felt a deep satisfaction, knowing that her care and patience had contributed to this transformation. After dinner, she helped him prepare for bed. She adjusted his pillows and blankets, ensuring he was comfortable and secure. Before leaving, she spoke softly, "I hope today has been good for you." He looked at her with a sincere expression, one that held warmth, gratitude, and trust. "It has been better than I expected. You have made a difference." Her heart lifted at the words. It was the acknowledgement she had hoped for, a recognition of her effort, care, and patience. She closed the door quietly, leaving him to rest, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. The walls he had built around his heart were no longer impenetrable. She knew that the journey they had shared had led to a meaningful transformation. That night, she reflected on the journey of the past days. She had witnessed a man who had been isolated, guarded, and distant slowly begin to open up, to trust, and to feel again. She understood that change was gradual, built on patience, empathy, and consistent care. Each small gesture, each shared story, and each moment of presence had contributed to a deeper bond between them. She thought about the moments that had mattered most, the sketches and drawings that revealed innocence and honesty, the shared games and puzzles that encouraged engagement, the music that evoked emotion, and the creative activities that allowed expression. Each experience had been a step toward connection, a step toward healing, and a step toward trust. As she drifted off to sleep, she felt a quiet joy. The billionaire was no longer just a distant figure confined to a wheelchair. He was a human being capable of feeling, trusting, and connecting. She had witnessed the slow, gentle melting of his walls, and she knew that her presence, her care, and her kindness had played a meaningful role in that transformation. The mansion, once cold and imposing, now felt alive with warmth and possibility. She had begun to see the man beneath the walls, the human being capable of hope, trust, and emotion. And though the journey was not over, she felt confident that the bond they had built would continue to grow, bringing light and comfort into a life that had long been shadowed by isolation and pain. She understood that her role went beyond physical care. She had become a companion, a confidant, and a source of emotional support. Her presence had brought a sense of normalcy, warmth, and human connection to his days, and in return, she had learned about resilience, patience, and the power of kindness. The experience had changed them both, leaving a lasting impact that would continue to unfold. As she lay in her room, she thought about the future. She knew there would be challenges, days when progress might feel slow or setbacks might occur. But she also knew that the foundation of trust, care, and understanding they had built was strong. She felt a sense of hope and anticipation, knowing that the bond between them would continue to deepen, bringing healing, comfort, and a renewed sense of connection to a life that had long been closed off. The young woman fell asleep with a smile, feeling fulfilled and inspired. She had entered the mansion to provide care, and in the process, she had witnessed a remarkable transformation. The billionaire, once distant and guarded, had begun to open his heart, showing trust, warmth, and genuine emotion. And she knew that their journey together had only just begun. promising a future filled with understanding, connection, and the quiet, profound beauty of human kindness. The sixth day began like the others, with soft sunlight filling the mansion and birds chirping outside. The young woman felt a quiet excitement as she prepared for the day. Over the past days, she had seen remarkable changes in the billionaire. He was no longer distant and cold, but showed glimpses of warmth, trust, and curiosity. Today, she hoped to continue this journey, to explore the growing connection between them and witness the next steps of his transformation. When she entered his room, he was sitting by the window, gazing out at the garden. There was a calmness in his posture, a sense of ease that had not been present when she first arrived. He looked at her and smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. She returned the smile, feeling encouraged and ready to engage in the day's activities. She began with breakfast, preparing everything according to his preferences. As she assisted him, they talked about small things, the color of the morning sky, the scent of flowers in the garden, and the soft sounds of nature outside. He listened attentively, occasionally commenting, and for the first time, he asked her about her dreams and what she hoped to do in the future. She shared her desire to continue helping people, to bring care and warmth wherever she could. He nodded thoughtfully, showing a side of interest and consideration that had rarely been visible before. After breakfast, she suggested a walk in the garden. At first, he hesitated, worried about the effort it might take. But she encouraged him gently, explaining how the fresh air and sunlight could lift his spirits. Slowly, he agreed, and she wheeled him outside. The garden was alive with color, the scent of flowers filling the air, and the warmth of the sun providing a comforting touch. As they moved slowly along the paths, he observed the details around him, the way the leaves fluttered in the wind, the patterns of sunlight on the grass, and the gentle movements of birds. She spoke softly about the beauty of each detail, sharing stories and memories from her life that related to nature. He listened, occasionally asking questions and sharing small observations of his own. They spent hours in the garden, talking, observing, and sharing moments of quiet reflection. The billionaire's walls were continuing to crumble, and he seemed to trust her more each day. He began to speak about feelings and thoughts he had long kept hidden, sharing memories from his childhood, moments of joy, and even regrets. She listened without judgment, offering her presence and understanding as a steady support. For the first time, he allowed himself to be truly vulnerable, and she realized the depth of the bond that had grown between them after returning inside. She prepared lunch, and they shared the meal together with conversation and laughter. He asked questions about her family and her town, showing genuine interest in her life. She shared stories of simple joys and challenges she had faced, and he responded with curiosity and warmth. It was a comfort to see him engaging with her not just out of necessity, but out of genuine interest and connection. In the afternoon, she suggested an activity to stimulate both his mind and creativity. She brought out some art supplies and encouraged him to try painting or drawing. At first he was hesitant, expressing doubt in his abilities, but she reassured him that it was just for fun. Slowly, he began to create, expressing thoughts and emotions he had not shared with anyone for years. She watched silently, offering encouragement and praise. Noticing how each stroke of the brush seemed to release tension and bring him closer to himself. The act of creating something with his hands became a form of therapy, allowing him to process emotions in a gentle and positive way. As the afternoon wore on, she assisted him with his exercises and routines, guiding him with patience and encouragement. There were moments of fatigue and frustration, but he responded with cooperation and trust, relying on her gentle presence to help him focus and progress. She was proud of the small steps he had taken and the trust he had placed in her. It was clear that the bond they had formed was deepening, built on patience, understanding, and genuine care. Later, she suggested listening to music. She played a soft, melodic piece, one that had become a favorite of his. He closed his eyes, letting the notes fill the room, and for a long moment there was silence. She noticed the relaxed expression on his face and the peacefulness in his body. Music had become a bridge between them, a way to connect without words, to share emotions and create comfort. For the first time, he seemed to allow himself to feel fully. Without fear or reservation, dinner was calm and filled with gentle conversation. They spoke about their day, small observations, and reflections on life. He shared thoughts about hope, trust, and the changes he had felt within himself since she had arrived. She listened, offering empathy and understanding, shared her own reflections on the growth and changes she had witnessed in him. The evening was filled with warmth, laughter, and a sense of connection that had been absent for so many years. After dinner, she helped him prepare for bed. She adjusted his pillows, arranged his blankets, and ensured he was comfortable. Before leaving, she spoke softly. "I hope today has been meaningful, sir." He looked at her with sincerity, gratitude, and trust. "It has been. You have made my days brighter, and I feel lighter because of you." Her heart lifted at the words. It was an acknowledgement of the transformation she had witnessed and facilitated. A recognition of her patience, care, and dedication. She closed the door quietly, leaving him to rest, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. The walls he had built around his heart had softened significantly, and she knew that the journey they had shared had created a meaningful bond. That night, she reflected on the journey they had taken together. She had seen a man who had been isolated, guarded, and distant gradually begin to trust, feel, and engage with the world around him. She understood that change was gradual, built on patience, empathy, and consistent care. Each small gesture, each shared story, and each quiet moment had contributed to a deeper connection between them. She thought about the moments that had mattered most, the time spent in the garden, the laughter over shared stories, the music that evoked emotion, and the creative activities that allowed expression. Each experience had been a step toward healing, trust, and human connection. She understood that her role had gone beyond physical care. She had become a companion, a confidant, and a source of emotional support. Her presence had brought warmth, comfort, and a sense of normalcy to a life that had been long shadowed by isolation. As she drifted off to sleep, she felt a quiet sense of accomplishment and hope. The billionaire was no longer the distant, cold figure she had first met. He had begun to open his heart, showing trust, warmth, and genuine emotion. Their journey together had facilitated healing, connection, and the rediscovery of hope and joy. She knew that the bond they had built would continue to grow, bringing light and comfort into his life, and leaving a lasting impact on both of them. The mansion, once cold and imposing, now felt alive with warmth, laughter, and the quiet beauty of human connection. She had witnessed a remarkable transformation, not only in him, but in their shared bond, and she felt inspired and fulfilled. Though the journey was ongoing, she knew that their connection had created a foundation for continued growth, understanding, and trust. And as she closed her eyes that night, she felt ready for whatever the future held, knowing that kindness, patience, and genuine care had the power to change lives in ways neither of them could have imagined.